Welcome to BeFM Drama. I am Joshua Cornwell, and this week we're presenting our 5-part adaptation of The Harpooned Man by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, a classic Sherlock Holmes mystery involving a bloody tale of murder and extortion leading from the high seas of the open ocean to the countryside of rural England. I'll be joining you today on this program as the voice of Dr. John Watson, Sherlock Holmes's faithful friend and chronicler. I have never seen Sherlock Holmes in better form, both mentally and physically, than he was in 1895. His growing fame had brought constant business. Holmes, like all great artists, lived for art's sake, and, except for the Holderness case, of course, I rarely saw him claim a large financial reward for his services. He was so focused on novelty that he frequently refused to help powerful and wealthy clients when he found their problems boring, but would devote weeks of pro bono effort to any beggar whose case presented bizarre or unusual qualities that appealed to his imagination and challenged his brain. In that memorable year, the very odd circumstances surrounding the death of Captain Peter Carey presented some particularly unusual features, and no record of Mr. Sherlock Holmes's work would be complete without an account of it. It was the first week of July, and my friend had been away from home so often that I knew something was up. This feeling was emphasized by the constant traffic of rough-looking men stopping by our apartment in search of Captain Basil. I assumed this nautical personage was one of the many false names and disguises Holmes used to conceal his identity. Holmes had said nothing of his work to me, and it was not my style to force him to talk about it. The first he gave me any sign of his investigation's focus was when he walked in for breakfast one morning carrying an enormous barbed whaler's harpoon under his arm like an umbrella. Good God, Holmes! You haven't been walking all over London with that thing, have you?
Not all over, no. Just to the butcher's and back.
The butcher?
Yes, and I return with an excellent appetite. The value of exercise before breakfast can't be overstated. Eat with me. I've ordered up some fresh bacon.
Holmes, I'm almost afraid to ask what form your exercise has taken. He chuckled and poured out his coffee as Mrs. Hudson came in with fresh eggs and bacon.
Let's just say that if you'd looked in on the back room of our local butcher an hour ago, you'd have seen a dead pig swinging from a hook in the ceiling and a shirtless gentleman furiously stabbing it with this weapon. I was that shirtless person, and I've satisfied my curiosity that I'd lack the strength to impale a pig with a single harpoon strike. Perhaps you would care to try it?
No, thank you. But may I ask you why you've been inflicting such indignities on the poor deceased creature?
Because it seemed relevant to the mystery out at Woodman's Lee.
A sudden knock at the door interrupted us, and an exceedingly alert young man poked his head into the room.
Ah, Inspector Hopkins, I've been expecting you. Come, have some bacon.
No, thank you, sir. I ate just before I came around. I spent the night in town after coming in yesterday to make my report.
Your loss. What did you report?
Failure. Absolute failure.
You've made no progress?
None.
Dear me, I must have a look myself.
I wish you would, Mr. Holmes. This is my first big investigation, and I'm at my wit's end. By all means, come down and lend me a hand.
Well, as it happens, I've already reviewed all the available evidence, including the inquest report. What do you make of the tobacco pouch that was found in the scene of the crime? Is there a clue there?
Hopkins looked surprised.
It was a man's pouch, sir. His initials were inside. It was made of sealskin. He was an old seal hunter.
But he had no pipe.
No, sir. We found no pipe. He smoked very little, by all accounts, but he may have kept tobacco for his friends.
No doubt. I only mention it because if I were handling the case, I would make that pouch the start of my investigation. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. My friend Dr. Watson knows nothing of this business, and I wouldn't mind hearing a review of the case either. Just give us the short sketch of the essentials, Hopkins.
Stanley Hopkins drew a slip of paper from his pocket.
I have a few dates here that detail the career of the dead man, Captain Peter Carey. He was born in 1845, 50 years old. He was a daring and successful seal hunter and whaler. In 1883, he commanded the steamer Sea Unicorn out of Dundee. He made several very lucrative voyages and retired in 1884. After that, he traveled for some time and finally bought a property called Woodman's Lee near Forest Row in Sussex. He lived there for 6 years and died there a week ago today.
What were Peter Carey's personality and habits?
Well, there are some unusual points there. He lived with his wife and younger daughter, aged 20, and 2 female servants. These servants were constantly being replaced. Peter Carey was gloomy when sober, but often drank, and when he was drunk, he became a perfect devil. He was known to throw his wife and daughter out in the middle of the night and chase them through the woods until the whole village was woken by their screaming.
What a charming fellow.
Quite so. He would come before the police several times over his domestic disturbances, and once for assaulting the local vicar. It would be hard to find a more dangerous man than Peter Carey. I've heard that he had the same personality when he captained his ship. His crew called him Black Peter, on account of the color of his huge beard and the violent anger that terrorized everyone around him. The man was universally hated by his neighbors. I have not heard a single word of sorrow about his passing.
I read in the inquest about the man's cabin. What can you tell us about it?
Carey built himself a small wooden outhouse. He called it his cabin. It was a good distance from the house, and he slept there every night. It was a single-roomed hut. He always kept the key in his pocket and allowed no other people inside. There are small windows on the cabin, but they are covered by blinds and never opened. One of these windows faces the high road, and when the light was lit in it, the villagers would gossip about what Black Peter was up to in there. That window gave us one of the few pieces of strong evidence that came out at the inquest.
Please allow me to quote from that inquest. A villager, named Slater, walking from Forest Row at about 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 days before the murder, stopped as he passed the property and looked at the light in the window. He swears he saw the shadow of a man's head on the blinds, and that it certainly wasn't Peter Carey. It was a bearded man, but the beard was shorter and cut differently than Carey's. That's what the inquest states. Of course, Slater had been drinking in the village pub and stood far from the window, so his testimony isn't perfect. Also, his statement refers to Monday, but the crime was committed early Wednesday morning.
That's right. On Tuesday, Peter Carey was in one of his evil moods, full of drink and savage as a wild beast. He roamed the house, and the woman ran. Late that evening, he went to his cabin. At about 1 a.m., his daughter, who slept with her window open, heard a fearful scream from that direction. But it was normal for Carey to scream and shout when he was drunk, so she took no notice. Waking at 7, one of the maids noticed the door of the hut was open, but she was so afraid of the man that it was midday before anyone ventured to see what had become of him. Peeping into the open door, they saw a sight that sent them running, with sickened faces, into the village. Within an hour, I was on the spot and had taken over the case.
And what did you find then?
Holmes forked a fresh slice of bacon into his mouth as the inspector sighed, pulled himself together, and looked us in the eye.
Well,
and we'll have to wait until tomorrow evening to learn what the young inspector found in Peter Carey's cabin here on BeFM Drama, as we continue with our 5-part adaptation of The Harpooned Man. From our studio here in Busan, this is your host, Joshua Cornwell of BeFM Drama.